chickens before they're hatched, etc. But one day an elementary school teacher gave her students an assignment, and she gave them part of a well-known proverb like that, and then she had them complete it. And what they came up with was rather interesting. Let me read you some of them. If you can't stand the heat, get a pool. Don't count your chickens, eat them. A watched pot never disappears. Too many cooks, so few meals. A miss is as good as a mister. Look before you run into a pole. As you shall make your bed, so shall you mess it up. Now, people are looking at me blankly. You don't know the original Proverbs. The others are, Scott and Nate are back there laughing at this chortling. Yeah. People in glass houses. What's the original? People in glass houses?
Shouldn't throw stones.
Shouldn't throw stones. People in glass houses shouldn't run around naked. Do you agree? I mean, it's a good proverb, you know, it's good. Better to be safe than punch a fifth grader. Strike while the bug is close. It's always darkest before daylight savings time. Never underestimate the power of termites. You can lead a horse to water, but how? And don't bite the hand that looks dirty. And it goes on and on. There's lots of different ones that these kids came up with this wisdom. The thing is, there's lots of worldly wisdom out there, right? And some of it's good and some of it's bad. But the question is, what is true wisdom? What is true wisdom in our lives? Our memory verse is Proverbs 9:10. It says this: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Now, oftentimes, and we've talked about this before, people look at that and go, fear. Oh, no, you know, you're supposed to be really scared of God. What's going on here? It's not that, oh no, run away kind of fear. That's not what this is saying here. The fear here is more like a reverence, a healthy fear. I mean, if you take a match and you strike it, and you have this lit match, you're not going to run away from the match, right? But hopefully you've learned that you don't take your finger and go like this with the match. Why? Because you have a healthy fear of it. You understand that fire burns. You have respect for it, and you treat it with respect. And that's what it's talking about here. It's a respect for it. It's a fear for it. It's an understanding of what God is capable of, the power, the immensity of God. That fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And knowledge of Him, knowledge of the Holy One, is understanding. The Bible talks a lot about love. It talks about faith. It talks about sacrificial living. But it also shares with us many, many words on wisdom. Words on wisdom. Now, mankind has always recognized the importance of wisdom. I mean, you hear about gurus, you know, the guys that are sitting on the mountaintop someplace, and we have to climb up to the mountaintop to get wisdom from this guru. Or in a lot of Asian societies especially, you have this intense respect for elders, right? In Korean society, for example, there's even, you can't speak in a certain way to, you have to use certain ways you talk to people who are older than you and younger than you. You can't talk in the same way to them. In Chinese, right, you don't say, hey, Joe, or something like that to your Buddha, right? I mean, if he's your older brother, you're going to speak to him. You either call him that, or you have an honorific, some way of communicating, because there's the idea that elders are somehow wiser. You treat them with respect. That's where this idea comes from in our cultures. We've lost a lot of it here in American culture, but we still show a lot of that respect. We gravitate toward people like Dr. Phil and Oprah and people like that, and we think that they have all the answers. But the thing is that sadly, we oftentimes look for wisdom in the wrong places. We look for wisdom in places that really may not have it. In the Bible, Solomon was considered a guy who had a lot of wisdom. But the thing is, where did his wisdom come from? It came from God. When God gave him a choice of what he needed, he could have, he asked for wisdom. And God gave him that wisdom. Now, obviously he stumbled later on. He lost a lot of that in his life. But we do see that much of what he said about wisdom, he collected in the book of Proverbs. And we see some really great ideas. But I just want to take just a second and look at some of these. In Proverbs 1:7, for instance, he says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." You know, when people get older, kids, when they begin to get older, they say things like, "Don't tell me what to do. I'll do what I want. I make my own decisions." Well, you know, that's pretty arrogant. Because it's not about you not having the ability to make decisions. But it's you shutting off somebody who has lived longer than you, who has wisdom, who has experience. We need to be able to take that wisdom in from those who have been there. But fools, they despise wisdom and instruction. Proverbs 2:6 says, "For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding." Thing is that the Lord often uses other people to impart wisdom. But their advice should be in accordance to what the Bible says, to what God says. If it's not in there, if it's not really along those lines, then you've got to suspect that wisdom may be suspect. Proverbs 2:12 says, "Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse." And true godly wisdom will help us be able to discern the truth, be able to understand what is really dangerous and what is really the pathway that we should be going on. Proverbs 2:16, "Wisdom will save you also from the adulterous woman, from the wayward woman with her seductive words." As humans, all of us struggle with sexual leanings that are not necessarily Christ-like. We struggle with our sexuality in that way. The thing is that wisdom will save us in that too. Wisdom will save us from going into impure practices. It will keep us safe. Proverbs 19:11, "A person's wisdom yields patience. It is one's glory to overlook an offense." In other words, we're able to, through wisdom, be able to see the other person's point of view. We're able to not react immediately when something bad happens to us. However, we do need to understand Proverbs 21:30. There's no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against God. In other words, wisdom that's not divinely inspired is faulty. It's coming from a different source. If it's contrary to God's teaching, that wisdom is foolish. And Proverbs 11:2, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." And this points out a key fact, is what you saw in the video, a key fact about true wisdom. Pride and true wisdom don't get along. It's like oil and water. Pride is coupled with humility. When you have humility, wisdom and humility go together. When those two go together, then that is where you see true wisdom coming out. That proverb, by the way, coincides with James's idea of the humility of wisdom, which is what we're really going to focus on today. The humility of wisdom. Now, you might think to yourself, is there a discrepancy here? Because to be wise, if you were considered wise, you would be exalted, right? People would look up to you and say, wow, you're so wise. So if that is being exalted, that is being lifted up, where's the humility involved in this? The irony, though, is that they do really go together. Look at James 3:13. He starts us out by saying, who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. He asks a very important question here. Who is wise and understanding among you? Look around you. Who's wise and understanding among you? Well, not him. Not her. Maybe. Are you sure? How can you know? How do you know that the person next to you is not really wise and really understanding? See, we oftentimes judge by appearances. We judge by a lot of different factors. I posted on my Facebook page not too long ago a video of a little girl, 6-year-old girl, and they did a social experiment where they dressed her up. And in one case, they dressed her up looking really nice, like she had a lot of money. And it was amazing. Here she is by herself in town, and she looks like she has a lot of money. And people are coming up, oh, little girl, are you lost? Can I help you? Etc., etc. Really kind to her. And then they dressed her up in poor clothes. Put her in the same kind of situation. Guess what? People ignored her. People didn't talk to her. In fact, some of them got abusive. One time, they had to actually stop the experiment because there was a man who got so abusive. Get out of here. What are you doing here? If I see you again, that kind of thing. And she ran crying to her mom. And so they stopped the experiment. But what did it prove? We judge by appearances. We judge by how people look. We even judge by schooling, right? I mean, which one are you going to respect more? A Harvard degree in business or a UCO degree in business? Why? Does that mean the person who had enough money to go to Harvard and to get accepted there is somehow smarter than the person who went to UCO and got the same degree? The thing is, we're so good at that, at judging others and being unwise in how we do it. So, who is wise and understanding among you? How can you tell? Well, James gives a couple of criteria here. He starts out by saying, first of all, look at the life. Let me show it by their good life. In other words, look at their life. How are they living? What's going on? Are they living in a Christ-like manner? Are you seeing the fruits of the Spirit in their lives? If you're not seeing that, then you have to question. Are they really following the path of wisdom? Are they really understanding what the big picture is all about? If their life is not reflecting it, if their life is somehow just living like everybody else, living in a sinful way, etc., where is the wisdom? Where is the understanding? Second thing he says, it is also seen by the deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. One of the best examples I think I've ever seen of this is in the book, one of my favorite books, is called To Kill a Mockingbird. And in To Kill a Mockingbird, if you've read the book or if you've seen the movie, there's this scene where there's this rabid dog. And the rabid dog is in a dangerous situation. He can start to run, And if so, you know, he might bite somebody, etc. And the sheriff pulls up, and one of the lead characters is a guy by the name of Atticus Finch. He's a lawyer. He's about in his 40s. And Hecate, the sheriff, pulls up. He's got his rifle, but he sees the dog a ways away, and he doesn't want the dog to start running. And so he looks at where the dog is, and he looks at the Radley house and realizes how close it is behind. And he takes the gun, and he says, "You take the shot, Mr. Finch." Well, this is the sheriff. It's his job. He's trained. He understands it. Why is he asking the lawyer to take the shot? Would you have done that if you're the sheriff, right? But the thing is, he knew that Atticus Finch, growing up, was this great shot. He knew that Atticus Finch could make that shot safely. And so he got rid of his pride and in total humility asked this 40-year-old lawyer, "You take the shot, because I can't hit him." Humility and wisdom go hand in hand. That example, though, highlights one of the main differences between wisdom and knowledge. See, knowledge is a measure of how much one knows, while wisdom is also recognition of how little we really do know and how much we have to rely on God. And that realization of how little we know is oftentimes extremely humbling. You guys know that I love books. In fact, I am passionate about books. You've seen Beauty and the Beast? You've seen that library in Beauty and the Beast? You know, the big one? Yeah. I want one of the rooms in my library to look like that. You know, because I've got this desire for a library to be like that, to have all that knowledge and everything else. I have an insatiable desire for knowledge. But it's also very humbling, because I realize the more that I know, the more that I learn, how little I really do know. I feel oftentimes like knowledge is this raging river out there, and I'm sitting on the banks with a thimble, and I'm reaching in and trying to grab a little bit of it and drink it down, and then another thimble, and as fast as I can go, but all of it's passing by. The thing is, we can't allow that understanding of our place, the understanding of our lack, to cripple us. Instead, we must express our wisdom in humility. And the Bible gives us many examples of this, but two really good examples, listen to this, two really good examples are found. First of all, in Christ washing the feet of his disciples. Christ is all-powerful. Christ is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, right? Christ could have, while people were passing him the bread and doing various things like that, Christ could have said, "You know what you guys need to do? You need to wash people's feet. That is how you can prove your humility." But what did Christ do? He didn't tell them. He showed them. He took off his outer garments, put on a loincloth, basically, got down on his knees, took those dirty feet and started to wash them. The King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Expressing his wisdom through humility. Another example is the prodigal son. The father, when he saw through the window, when he saw his son coming up, he could have sat in the window and just waited for that son to return. He could have crossed his arms and said, "Yeah, well, about time. I knew he'd be back. About time. Let that boy come up here. Let him get in here, and I might forgive him. I might. I'll teach him a lesson." But no, the father in his wisdom, knowing that true reconciliation would never happen that way, The father in his wisdom ran out the door, ran to meet his son, and kissed him, and put the ring on him, and had the robe put on him. The father understood that that was the way. He had to humble himself. Even though he had done nothing wrong, he had to humble himself, get off his pride for his son to be truly reconciled. See, what we need to see is that true wisdom in humility is contrasted with the futility of earthly wisdom. That futility of earthly wisdom. And I say wisdom in quotes. In Proverbs 14:12 we read that there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. It's the same with our wisdom. Our wisdom says, oh, this is the right way, but if it is not God-based, it just leads to destruction. James gives us a sharp warning in James 3:14. He says, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. You think, who would do this? I mean, who is going to boast? Who's going to be boasting about the envy, boasting about the selfish ambition? Who's going to be really putting that out there? But we see it. Listen to these statements, and these are statements that you're going to hear from people we hold up. I'm driven to succeed, to smash the competition, to be the very best. Really? Okay. We listen to those, and our athletes make these. Our celebrities make these statements, and we applaud them. Yeah, go be the very best, smash the competition, do this, do that, etc. And who is being glorified? The self. That person. Being lifted up. Yeah, we can be the best that we can be, but we must have the right reasons. We must have the right reasons. We're always looking out for number one. Why? Who says that you should be number one? Who should be number one in your life? Other than God. We get upset when someone else gets recognized and we don't. That's what he's talking about with the bitter envy. Someone else gets the glory and we don't. That's bitter envy. And we only do good things to be recognized. That's what he's talking about, the selfish ambition. We're only doing it so that it makes us look good. James tells us this wisdom. Here's what it really is, James 3:15. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. That kind of attitude, that kind of wisdom that the world says is right, is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. And instead of true wisdom, this is the fruit you get from that. James 3:16. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. And you know this. I mean, you can't go out and plant a thistle seed and expect to get a crop of daisies. So, what is true wisdom? What is true wisdom? Well, we see the purity of heavenly wisdom. The purity of heavenly wisdom. By definition, purity is not polluted. Therefore, pure and true wisdom cannot contain sins like envy or selfishness. So, what does it really look like? What does James say it looks like? James 3:17, he says, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Well, where does it come from? It says, first of all, that wisdom comes from heaven. It doesn't come from our self-help books. It doesn't come from our gurus. It doesn't come from Oprah or Dr. Phil, unless they're in connection with God here. It doesn't come from anybody like that or anything like that. No, true wisdom comes from heaven, and it is pure. So how do we get it? How and when can we get that kind of pure wisdom? In 1994, there was a woman by the name of Ramona Calloway who suddenly began to have seizures, bad seizures. They became really heavy, and at first she thought maybe she had contracted Huntington's disease because her father and her brothers had had it. But when they did the test, they discovered no, her genes had not been affected that way. But they couldn't figure out what it was. And her husband, Phil, just watched her fade and fade. And when his young children would come up to him and ask, is Mommy going to die? He couldn't answer. He didn't know. And they had hundreds of people praying for her. And medical specialists had come, and they were stymied. They didn't know what was going on. They couldn't figure out why in the world this woman was fading so fast. By 1996, in the fall, she had dropped down to 90 pounds. And she was having seizures not just once in a while, not even just daily, sometimes every hour. And they couldn't figure it out. And Phil, who had hardly ever left her side, one night went into the backyard and just fell down to his knees, and he said, God, he said, I can't take it anymore. Please do something. And in that moment, in his brokenness, in his absolute, I've tried everything, God gave him the name of a doctor. They went in and called him, and the next morning, Ramona went to see him, and the doctor diagnosed her with a rare chemical deficiency. Within a week, Ramona's seizures had ended. Her eyes sparkled again. The miracle was incredulous. Phil said, God gave me back my wife. But the thing is that it often happens. That wisdom from God happens when we really have come to the end of ourselves. When we are willing to admit, you know, I can't do it. The world can't give me this wisdom. The only way that I can get this wisdom is from God. When we come in brokenness and say, Lord, I have no answers, but you do. Then oftentimes we see the wisdom come. Dwight L. Moody put it this way. He says, the Christian on his knees sees more than the philosopher on tiptoe. The Christian on his knees sees more than the philosopher on tiptoe. Notice also the qualities here. Peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Who does that sound like? Sounds like Christ. Christ-like qualities. But there are also attributes of the perfect peacemaker. In line with this, James closes with this verse, James 3:18. He says, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. And here's the contrast. This whole passage, this contrast. He is saying man's wisdom, the way we do things, reaps disorder in every evil practice. But God's wisdom reaps a harvest of righteousness. And it only comes from Him. So, are we wise or otherwise? Are we wise or otherwise? Which are we like in our church, in our work, in our families? Are we living with the idea that, you know what, I can't do it on my own. I have to have God. God is the one who directs my path because He knows what's best. Are we living in the wisdom and how we react to others because of God working through us? Are we allowing that wisdom to guide us in what we do, in what we say? Are we instead listening to our friends, or listening to the media, or listening to our teachers, or whatever? Because any of that stuff that does not conform to what God says is earthly wisdom. But only when it comes from God can we trust it. Only then is it pure. Only then will it lead to a harvest of righteousness. In a second, we're going to have communion. I think it's a good time for us to really ask that question. Lord, have I been spending my time trying to listen to other voices instead of listening to yours? Am I really trying to solve my own problems? Am I being ignorant and saying, I can make my own choices, I don't have to be told what to do? Not by anybody, not by God. Are we being smart? And really listening to what God has to say? Are we being wise or otherwise? Pastor.
Okay, let's pray. Heavenly Father, once again, we are so thankful we can come to the house of the Lord to worship you on this Sunday morning. We also so grateful we can come to sing praise to you, to worship together with our brother and sister to worship our Lord. And once again, we thank you for your words through Pastor John. Father, we know that we need you because all the wisdom is from you. You are the source of the wisdom. Father, as we come to the table of the Lord, we participate in this communion. Father, as we said that